think for those of you who have heard this back in October, I just want you to take a little stock and kind of think of where are you at from a stress standpoint? Is there anything that you've been incorporating? And for those of you who this is new to you, you can also take stock. One of the ways that I have people do this is to kind of think about um, a stoplight. And green is, I feel pretty good. Go, right? I've got some resilience here. Yellow is that gas tank's getting a little bit depleted. I need to be paying attention to what I'm doing to fill things up. And red is I am out of gas. Like I am in a depleted place. And so kind of take just a minute and think about where you are right now from a stress standpoint. We are going to talk about calming the stress response, how to move from those feelings of burnout to resiliency. So, how do we move from feeling like we're at a red, we don't have any gas in the gas tank, to having some gas? Our bodies really are smart. They're beautiful and they know when they're out of whack and they're going to tell us. They were created to give us valuable information. And so your body's just trying to tell you how you're doing. I think it takes a little bit, we need to give a little space, a little time to just pay attention to what our body is telling us. So, for those of you who have paper nearby, I want you to grab a piece of paper and I want you to take a moment and write down two environments in which you feel stressed, and then three activities within those environments that cause you to feel stressed. For those of you who don't have paper, maybe just mentally we're going to take a couple of minutes and just kind of think about where are those places that we are that kind of trigger stress in us, and what are we doing in those environments? Going to give you another minute here. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. So, two environments in which you do not feel stressed, and three activities within those environments that decrease your stress. So, we're going to just take another minute and a half, 2 minutes to think about those things.
Nikki, your PowerPoint disappeared. Did you mean for that to happen?
No. Should I try a stop share? I'll try to reshare it here.
I was able to still see it.
Okay.
Oh, it disappeared on my end. Maybe it's my screen. Hold on.
Okay. I'm restarting it, so
I can see it now. Can
Okay,
everybody else still see it?
Yes.
Okay,
thank
perfect.
you. Do you guys need a little bit more time? Okay, I didn't hear any no's, so I will keep going here. Instead of asking, how are you doing? Try asking, how are you sleeping? You're going to learn a lot more. I actually think sleep is a passion of mine. I think it's such an important thing, and it really tells us what's going on with the nervous system when we're not sleeping. It typically it points to something that's going on during the day. So we have this process of memory. This is kind of how I came to talk about the nervous system through memory. And so memory is this really complicated thing, but you can break it down into very simple components to understand it. So we have input that comes in, we transfer that into storage, and then hopefully we can pull that out and recall it later. And input takes focus. If we cannot pay attention, we're not going to be able to take anything in. So we first have to be able to focus. And our brain uses our alerting nervous system to focus. So we call that our fight or flight response or our sympathetic nervous system. So we kick that in and we're able to take in information. And then that transfer from attention into storage, we consider learning. And we kind of encode things like if you really love something, you spend time thinking about it, you spend time doing it. And so you're going to have a much more highly developed drawer for all of those things that you love. Things maybe that aren't as important to you, that might go into the junk drawer or that might be scattered around on the floor. And that can affect our ability to recall or pull it out later. We only encode or put things in storage when we're calm. And so that storage part of the filing cabinet, I want you to think about we need to be calm. And we call that calming response rest and digest because it's also when we're digesting food or our parasympathetic response. And that's a little bit of an overgeneralization that we need to be calm because if something you're in a critical situation, you may remember that better when you're really stressed out because your body and your brain do not want you to repeat that. It wants to keep you safe. So, in general, though, we remember things better when we are calm. And I think about that movement from input to storage as a teeter-totter, or going from alerting to calming as a teeter-totter. And we move back and forth from alerting to calming throughout the day. Some of us are really good at stepping on the gas. We're good at paying attention. And in fact, I think some people who burn out their attention, they stay in that attention domain. They do not restore the system. So I do want you to think attention is using gas, storage is putting gas in the tank. It's calming down. Um, when we're in a focused state, we release adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And cortisol is what's damaging when it's elevated for long periods of time. So again, we really need to calm down that nervous system and move from um, alerting to calming throughout the day. We need to not stay in that alerting nervous system response. The path of least resistance is for us to be stressed. It's the easiest thing for the body to do or the brain to do because it wants to keep us safe. So we're always going to have a bias towards a stress response versus a calming response. Sometimes calming really does take effort. It's something that we need to be able to lean into. Um, the other thing that's interesting is I said this already, but what we do during the day is repeated at night. So if we have a good movement from alerting to calming during the day, we're going to have better sleep at night. And I really, I correlate that input to REM sleep because REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, it restores our eye movements for the upcoming day. So it helps us to focus. And storage really is correlated to deep sleep because when we take time to calm or put things in storage during the day, we tend to have better deep sleep at night. So this is another way to think about that whole system that I talked about. This is the arousal continuum. So it's showing on one side, there is the sympathetic nervous system or that fight or flight response, and the other side is that parasympathetic response or that calming response. I'm going to draw your attention to one error on here. If you see, you can kind of see in the middle where it says alert and calm. I actually think that's supposed to be alert. And I think the next one down that says alert is supposed to be the alert and calm. So I think those are supposed to be reversed. But again, it's easiest for us to move up that stress response versus that calming down. So we really need to take time to calm during the day. Um, what's cool about that fight or flight response or that sympathetic nervous system response is that it's generic. Um, the hypothalamus causes the sympathetic nervous system to release adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, like I talked about. And these hormones propel the body into a state of arousal, which actually decreases metabolism. It increases our heart rate and our blood pressure. It increases our breathing rate and it increases muscle tension. And again, we have increased cortisol levels. Because it's generic, that means we can also we can move it in the other direction. So there are things that we can do to move it into that parasympathetic response. So my three favorite ways, or the three big things to calm down that nervous system response are breathing, movement, and panoramic vision. So breathing, I want you to think anytime that you take a long out breath, you are slowing down your heart rate. You are calming down your nervous system. So anytime you do a good, you are calming down that nervous system response. Panoramic vision. So whenever we're using gas or we're in that sympathetic response, we're paying attention. We are using what I call focal visual processing. We're looking for the detail, right? So that's, or we're looking for the threat. We'll even get tunnel vision if we're really stressed out, where we kind of shut down peripheral vision. So looking, looking for detail is using gas. The opposite of that is panoramic vision. It's taking in a view. So I want you to think about somewhere where you go that you feel really calm. What always comes to mind for me is my brother's cabin and being out in the morning when it's so calm and beautiful and quiet and the water's quiet and just taking in that big view. So panoramic vision calms down the stress response. And then movement is the last thing that calms us down. And so I want you to kind of think about the last time that you felt kind of stressed and you went for a walk. Did you feel better after that walk? The majority of us are going to say yes, because when we move forward in space, we use side to side eye movements. They're called saccadic eye movements. We actually do that during REM sleep as well. So these side to side eye movements, they calm down the amygdala or the stress center of the brain. Movement quiets that stress center of the brain. Movement also, again, if we move a little bit during the day, we're going to get more deep sleep at night. If we move a moderate amount during the day, we're going to get even more deep sleep at night. So it really does help that teeter-totter. And I think of it as mimicking our most restorative phase of sleep, that slow wave deep sleep. It mimics it. So we're going to go back to cortisol. When we are in that fight or flight response, one of the things that we release is cortisol. And sleep deprivation is a physiological and a psychological stressor. So think about you're just starting out with maybe a half full gas tank instead of a full gas tank. When we start off, with less in the gas tank, you tend to have dampened morning cortisol. So, cortisol has its own rhythm that happens during sleep, and it should actually during the waking hours. Cortisol in the morning should peak, and it's at its highest levels when we first, um, like within that first hour. Ideally, it actually is what pushes us to get out of bed and get going. And then it goes down and it's at its lowest levels when we first fall asleep and we're in those deeper levels of sleep. And then it starts to rise again in the middle of the night to push us to get out of bed in the morning. So if we are sleep deprived, it'll flatten that. So we'll have a dampened morning cortisol. We have a harder time getting up and getting going in the morning. Then we're going to have increased afternoon and evening levels of cortisol, which makes it harder to wind down. And so there's a dysregulation in that secretion pattern. It flattens that day and night rhythm, and we have impaired stress reactivity. So we have less cushion to react to stress. And this picture that's shown, it's just showing the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is related to that cortisol response. So it's just kind of showing how we move through that. So, cortisol and health consequences. Heightened cortisol during the day can negatively impact our metabolism, our blood pressure, our immune response. It decreases both our innate and our adaptive immunity. This can lead to a turning on of autoimmune conditions. It dysregulates digestive processes, reproductive processes, and growth processes. It can impact fertility in men and women. It can negatively impact mood, motivation, and fear. I even think about how our in order for us to focus well, we need good dopamine levels in the morning. And so I do think, I mean, I'm just aware of how that, how a flattening of all of this can impact dopamine as well. It can lead to headaches. We can have poor memory and concentration and more brain inflammation. So again, what you do during the day is repeated at night. If you have your foot on the gas pedal all day, you're going to have a harder time getting good restorative rest at night. If you take time to rest during the day, you're going to be more easily able to rest at night. I know a lot of people who step on the gas all day long, and I think especially when you're looking at screens, right? That really is keeping you in that fight or flight response. And then when they lay down at night, that's when their mind starts to go. It's just going. So we need to give ourselves silence during the day. We need to have some quiet during the day just to even think about things so that we don't lay down at night and then our mind can't rest. So what do you think about stress? Do you think stress is bad? Stress is good? Maybe fill in the blank. Again, it's a generic process. Your body doesn't know the difference between good and bad stress. How you think about it does matter, though. Your body's going to react more negatively to negative thought patterns or more positively to positive thought patterns. Stress really just points us towards what is important to us. Embedded in every stress is something that's important to you. And the key really is to find it. Sometimes even just simply acknowledging that you feel stressed. Um, how might that impact you? Just kind of taking a moment to take stock and kind of where you're at. Welcoming stress can actually give us energy to overcome challenges. One of my favorite stories is I don't know if any of you have read the Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker, but he talks about when he was I don't know in this book if he talks about it. I heard him talk about when he was a new naval recruit and he was kind of there, the other recruits, they were all together complaining and kind of griping. And there was a group of seasoned Marines that were across the way. And these guys were like, "Whoa," just, yes, I'm up for this challenge. And he really saw the difference in those responses and how that impacted how they were willing to embrace it. So he talks about welcoming the challenge. Welcome the challenge that's inherent. Um, this is another image that I really like, the oyster and the irritant, which may be a piece of sand, something that is irritating that oyster. And that oyster, when that piece of sand comes in from outside, it doesn't run or hide. It doesn't pretend that it isn't there. It actually takes that irritant and it wraps around it. It starts to shellac it and it makes it into something beautiful. And that's how the pearl gets formed. And I think that's another really different way to think about stress. Again, kind of taking a step back and seeing what am I really stressed about here? What do I want here? And really look at how we're going about moving towards what we're really wanting. In a book by Alyssa Epple, called The Stress Prescription. She's a stress researcher, and it's a great book on lots of different strategies that you can use to really calm that stress response. And in listening to her talk about the stress response, she talks about in her own life, oftentimes when she's facing a stressor, she will think about it like a rope attached to a brick wall. And so here's this rope, that is anchored in a brick wall, and she's just pulling on that rope. She's trying to pull down that brick wall. And she looks up, and the brick wall hasn't moved. And she looks down at her hands, and they're all chafed. And she'll tell herself, put down the rope. And I think for all of us, there are things that there are just sometimes there are problems that we can't solve. Oftentimes there are problems that aren't solvable. I think I was reading somewhere that they're like in our lifetime, you guys, I'm going to throw out a random percentage. This is not good, but probably like 50% of problems that we face in life are unsolvable. It was a significant amount. There are a lot of things that we want to be fixed, but they are not going to be fixed, and maybe not in our lifetime. And so, am I trying to solve the unsolvable problem? Put down that rope. Another way I think about this is a CEO versus a janitor. And in my own life, am I going to show up as the CEO who's just trying to manage and control everything, or I'm going to show up as the janitor? And I like the janitor because I can sweep. I can do that thing that's directly in front of me and move things a little bit further. But again, I'm not the CEO. There are a lot of things that I don't have control over. So I can show up today and I can do the work in front of me. So here's a little bit more on things that we can do to reduce cortisol. Um, Breath. We're going to talk a little bit more about breath in the upcoming slides. We talked a little bit about movement already, and I also want you to think about rhythm. Rhythm is so good for our brain. Walking, dancing. I even think like the rhythm of rocking in a chair, right? Rhythm calms us down. Panoramic vision, take in that view, take in that beauty around you. Hydration is really underrated. It's such an important thing. It can make a big difference in our ability to even visually focus. It matters in so many ways. They actually think dehydration is, they're attributing some of the brain shrinkage associated with aging and dementia to dehydration, chronic dehydration. So hydration is just such an important thing. When we're dehydrated, our cortisol levels are elevated. We're going to be more stressed. When you're hydrated, you're going to have more cushion to face things. Nature just naturally calms us down. Roger Ulrich was a healthcare design expert, and he discovered in 1984 that hospital patients with windows that faced trees recovered quicker and they asked for less pain medication than patients who had a view of a brick wall. And I used to work at Mayo, and when I was there, one of the things that was so beautiful about the campus, they really had an attention to art and beauty. And I just think about the tulips that would come up in the spring. The rooms did not have abstracts in them. They had landscapes. Again, think that panoramic vision. Um, or they had something from nature because it is calming. 20 minutes in nature can actually significantly reduce levels of cortisol. The next thing is connection. What's interesting about connection? Connection is huge. Um, feeling loved is a shock absorber. We really do better when we do not feel alone. There's research on people viewing a mountain, and when they're alone, it looks steeper than when they're with another person. So even their perception of the how steep is this was with people who are gonna climb this mountain. So with mountain climbers, they when they had someone with them, it wasn't as steep as when they were alone. And then the last one is gratitude. Research really shows that practicing gratitude every day can help to reduce cortisol levels by up to 23%, which can improve your mental and physical health. Um, Alyssa Eppel's research, she talks about caregiving moms who had more positive emotions at the beginning and end of the day had healthier mitochondria. The mitochondria, I kind of think of on a cellular level, the mitochondria are like the engines of the cells. So the engines of our cells work better when we have more positive emotions at the beginning and the end of the day. So we are going to focus on breath. Breath really is a very simple tool and it has big rewards. So you can use your breath to alter your brain and body for greater focus and resilience. You can change the way that you respond to stressful situations in real time. You can learn to direct your breath at will to decide if you're going to accelerate, you're going to go faster, if you're going to brake, you're going to slow down, or you're going to kind of keep things nice and even. You're going to go on cruise control. You can control your internal levers, and this can help you to let go of doubt, to be more present, and to even refocus on the big picture. There are two different types of breath work practices. There is attentional breath work, which is every day. You might set a timer for 10 minutes and focus on your breath and direct your attention to something like a loving kindness meditation or a mindfulness practice. Or you can have intentional breath work, which is every day you're finding one opportunity to shift your mental and physical state using at least 3 energizing or 3 calming breaths. I highly recommend if you are a journaler, or even if you're not a journaler, to start journaling. Write a few sentences in a journal to reflect on your experience and how they affected your day. So, how did that attentional breath work or that intentional breathing practice impact how you function that day? Connect that act of breathing to how it made you feel. Breath work reduces symptoms associated with anxiety, insomnia, depression. It boosts our immune system. It helps us to recover from injury, and it even relieves chronic pain. So right now, we're going to find our diaphragm. So you can kind of see on the screen, it's showing belly breathing versus chest breathing. So finding your diaphragm really helps you to have better belly breaths. So the way that we do this is that we're going to take a sniff in. So maybe place your hand above your belly button under your rib cage and take a quick sniff in, and you should feel kind of a jumping where your diaphragm is. And then what we're going to do is we are going to close our eyes. We're going to take a deep inhale we want to feel that belly rise. So We're going to take an inhale in for a count of 4, hold it for 2, and then exhale to a count of 8. Again, inhale 4,
Right. I bet I'm still hungry.
hold it for 2, exhale to a count of 8. Do you feel more calm? You just practiced intentional breathing. Now we get to do one of my favorite breathing techniques. I used to teach diaphragmatic breathing, but nobody follows through. I would teach it to lots of people, and just a handful tended to follow through. So, with this physiological sigh, what I've found is it's probably one of the quickest ways to calm down the nervous system, and it works for everybody. It's just so effective, and people can leave my office and practice this right away. So a physiological sigh is 2 inhales through the nose. So one good one, a little bit more, and then a long exhale through the mouth. Okay, so we're going to do that again. Good inhale in through the nose, a little bit more, long exhale through the mouth. If you do 2 to 5 of these, within 45 seconds, your heart rate will go down and your blood pressure will go down. I love this technique. I have a favorite neuroscientist, and his lab studies stress. And they were doing a research study, and they needed people to be calm consistently. And they were using meditation, and it just didn't work for everybody. So they went back to the drawing board, and they came across research from the 1930s. And this is actually something we naturally do. We'll do it when we sleep. I really think about it when children sob at the end of their crying, they'll go, that is a physiological sigh. So we, again, 2 to 5 of these within 45 seconds, heart rate goes down and blood pressure goes down. They used this in their research study, and it worked 100% of the time. You can also use this to sleep. So you can do it cyclically. So they talk about doing 25 of these. And if you lose count, you just start at the lowest number that you remember. Or you can do this for like 5 minutes. And you can do it to fall asleep. You can do it if you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to fall back asleep. But it is a really great technique that you can use in a lot of different situations to calm down. And now we're going to do an energizing breath. And so it's kind of the opposite. So just think anytime you do a long exhale, it's going to calm down your nervous system. So instead, we're going to do a long inhale and a short exhale. So it's going to look like this. How do you feel? Were you able to do that? That definitely does for me. That ramps me up. So in general, we energize with a long inhale and a short exhale, and we calm down with a short inhale and a long exhale. I have a friend that actually would have a hard time waking up in the morning, and she would use that energizing breath and really found that to be an effective technique to help her to get going in the morning. So now we're going to focus on emotions. Not negative emotions, but depleting emotions, and renewing emotions. We need fear and sadness and pain and disgust. It's really our early warning system to keep us safe. All emotions help survival, but depleting emotions are more chaotic, and they put us into a state of imbalance. And over time, this can cause damage. So we need those negative emotions, but we really need to not stay in that place. I just love that I called them negative. Depleting. You need these depleting emotions. So emotions such as fear, frustration, impatience, and anger have a toxic feeling and cause the release of stress hormones. This often results in reduced muscle mass, brain cell death, impaired memory, accelerated aging, impaired mental function, and diminished performance. Um, we don't want to stay in this chaotic state for long periods of time because it really does put us into a state of imbalance, and over time that can cause damage. When scientists placed a cold virus into the noses of 100 people, only 25 to 40 get sick. The virus is necessary, but it's not sufficient. If you are an introvert or a negative person, you're more likely to develop a cold from a nose full of germs. This is from Lisa Feldman Barrett. The other thing I really like to talk about here is shame and guilt as well, because I think this really plays into how our emotions are impacting us. Shame, when we look at shame, the idea behind shame is that there is something wrong with me. And versus guilt. Guilt is there's something wrong with what I did. So at the core of me, I am good, but there's something wrong with my behavior. In the book Secrets from the Eating Lab, one of the things that she talks about is that guilt can motivate us to repair. So when we see that there's something wrong with my behavior, it motivates us to make a repair. Shame has been shown to lead to the release of cortisol and pro-inflammatory cytokines linked to depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. So I really think of when we think, oh, there's something inherently wrong with me, it puts us in a place of shame and it makes us sicker. It's not good for us. So I just think it's so important that our identity be anchored in something bigger, right? That I am good inside, and really differentiating between shame and guilt and being aware of that in our thoughts. Renewing emotions recharge our battery and they build more resilience. So, emotions and attitudes such as love, care, courage, tolerance, and appreciation create neurochemicals that regulate your system and they offset energy drain, resulting in increased longevity, increased resilience to adversity, increased memory, increased problem solving, increased intuition and creativity, and increased job performance and achievement. When people frequently categorize, label, and understand their emotions, they can recover from cancer faster. This means that people who effectively categorize emotions might be better protected against chronic inflammatory processes that lead to bad health. Again, that's another Lisa Feldman Barrett quote. And I just love this because I think my Irish grandmother would love this too. In Irish, when you talk about emotion, you don't say, I am sad. You would say, sadness is on me. And I love that because there's an implication of not identifying yourself with the emotion fully. I am not sad. It's just that sadness is on me for a while. Something else will be on me another time, and that's a good thing to recognize. Lisa Feldman Barrett is a professor at Northeastern University, and she wrote a book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. And she talks about how emotions aren't happening to you. The brain is predicting, it's telling itself stories inside the body based on what's happening in the world. It's trying to predict. When something goes wrong, you need to use your explanations to know what to do, and that we can actually seed our brain to predict differently. You can make decisions and choices about how you will act. You are the only one who can change these things, who can change this internal story that we're telling. You always have tools available at your disposal to act and feel differently. When you give introspection to situations, like when you're mad with your son that he's heading to school looking like he just rolled out of bed. So you take a little bit more time to see what's behind this anger that I'm feeling towards my son. Are you concerned that his teacher won't take him seriously? Are you nervous his attire is reflecting poorly on you? Or are you irritated that you spent money on clothes that he doesn't wear? Those are different problems, right? And so when we take time to look more deeply, we really are healthier because we're understanding more of what's going on and we're not stopping at just the emotion of anger. In a collection of studies, people who could distinguish finely among their unpleasant feelings were less likely to drink excessively when stressed or retaliate aggressively against someone who had hurt them. When emotions feel difficult to handle, move your body. It actually changes your predictions and therefore your experience. Also, change your location. So, move to a different environment or recategorize how you feel. Movement changes brain state. In 2014, at Stanford University, they did a study where they asked 176 adults to complete creative thinking tasks after walking or sitting for 5 to 16 minutes. The walkers' creative output increased by 60% compared to the sitters. So I think that's another really amazing thing. Um, this is Richard Branson is actually somebody who they'll stand up in meetings. He's known for walking around, and he talks about it as a great way to get things done. People often get distracted at meetings, or it's just a nicer way of saying that they get sleepy or bored or disconnected or exhausted. Standing up, talking about ideas and solutions is a great way to stay awake and engage in conversation. Um, I just think it's so interesting how movement calms us down and helps us to be more creative. Realize that your perceptions of others are just guesses. Again, we're trying to predict. They're not facts. Your own perceptions are like a photo of the world, often a poor quality one. You can recognize effective realism when you have a gut feeling or you read a story that you instantly believe. It keeps you believing even when the evidence puts it highly in doubt. Curiosity is the best defense. I really love this because when I was talking about the nervous system before, I again talked a little bit about using gas versus putting more gas in the tank. And so externally, when we're looking at something visually, when we're focused, we're using this smaller view, right? We are using gas. And when we take in that panorama, we're putting more gas in the tank. And I really see that as not only an external thing that we're doing, but there's an internal reality to this too. And so when we're trying to fix things internally, it feels tight. It's like the smaller thing. We're trying to fix this thing. When we're curious, we have a wide internal view. And so curiosity really opens us up to that wider view. So choosing, how do we move from depletion to renewal? This is, I love this actually. I think this is a really interesting way to look at the nervous system. So we had talked about the nervous system in a couple of different ways before, and now here is another one. Um, so you can see how there is nervous system arousal going up and down. And so it's showing high nervous system arousal and low nervous system arousal. And then the horizontal axis, it says hormonal response. And you see one direction is pointing towards negative emotions, and the other one is pointing towards positive or renewing emotions. So depleting emotions versus renewing emotions. And then you see on the left side cortisol. So that depleting place, the person is cortisol dominant. And on the renewing side, they are producing something called DHEA. DHEA is actually the foundation of a bunch of hormones, especially estrogen and testosterone. So we're going to talk about a classic gratitude study that impacted these DHEA levels, but just think of it, it's renewing. And then you can look and see the heart rate. So with each point on that axis, you see a different heart rate. So when we are running high, you see it's a little bit more chaotic heart rate, up and down waveform patterns. When we're running low, you can see that that is, not as much movement. And then when you look on the left side, you really see that it is pretty jagged. And on the right side, it's what we'd call a much more coherent heart rhythm pattern. There's actually something called heart rate variability where they measure the distance between heartbeats. And so what you're seeing with renewing emotions is more distance between those heartbeats. The person is healthier, they have more capacity versus on that left side of the screen where they're more cortisol dominant. And I love this because I think this really helps us to kind of see, where have I been spending time? Where, like in this last week, where have I really been spending most of my time? And then where would I like to be spending more time? And so what kinds of things help me move into that more renewing place? The first time that this is a worksheet, and the first time that I filled it out, I actually was in a more depleting place. And it was very helpful for me to see, oh, here's where I've been spending my time. And it became very clear, like what I needed to be thinking about and working on. Um, I really think to all of this, self-awareness is a key factor. If you're not aware of energy drains and able to stop them, what does that look like? If you are aware and you're able to stop them, you learn to plug those energy leaks and you have more capacity at the end of the day. You learn to fill your gas tank up. Um, Another way to think about this is intelligent energy management versus stress management. I think sometimes stress management has kind of a negative connotation, but intelligent energy management, how can we manage our energy in a little bit better way? So this is a classic gratitude study that was done in 1998, and they tested the hormone levels of 45 healthy adults. And then they split them into two groups. They trained 30 of the participants to replace negative thought patterns with feelings of compassion and appreciation. So with gratitude. And then the group, the other 15, they didn't train them in anything. And after a month, they came back and they looked at everyone's hormone levels. There was no change in the control group. And in the group who underwent the gratitude training, they had a 23% reduction in cortisol. So almost a quarter reduction in cortisol levels, and a remarkable 100% increase in the feel-good DHEA hormones. DHEA is, again, a naturally occurring hormone. It acts like an antidepressant. Cortisol, again, is that stress hormone that helps to trigger our fight or flight response. When it's chronically elevated, it leads to depression, poor immune system function, weight gain, and other health problems. And so just spending time in gratitude, in moving from these negative thought patterns to more feelings of compassion and appreciation, it really gives us more of what we need. It's just incredible. This is a grid, so I kind of like how it breaks it down. I think it really correlates to um, the um, running high versus running low, and more depleting versus more renewing side of things. And so gives you a little bit of language to more finely tune, where am I at, right? I am feeling more depleted. What's happening? What is this emotion? And look a little bit more deeply. This slide tells us a little bit more about that coherent versus incoherent heart rhythm pattern. So it's really interesting is our heart and brain communicate, and the heart has its own complex nervous system. the heart brain. The heart sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. Patterns from the heart affect brain centers involved in perception, emotional experience, and self-regulation. Incoherent heart signals inhibit brain function, and coherent heart signals facilitate brain function, including decision-making, reaction times, social awareness, and ability to self-regulate. And so, again, the way that I just simply think about this is that when we are in a more coherent heart rhythm pattern, we have more of what we need, right? It's putting more gas in. It helps us to function better. And that when our heart is in a more coherent pattern, our brain wave patterns are more coherent. Because just like we did with the breathing, when we do a long out breath, it calms us down. And that'll give us a more coherent heart rhythm pattern, which in turn will change our brain wave patterns. We are going to do a quick coherence technique. And so this is even more powerful than just breathing by itself. Heart math has a foundational technique which helps to neutralize negative emotions and move into a more balanced mind, body, spirit. It stops energy drains from that depleting state, and you can use it in as little as a few seconds. So I want everybody to get comfortable in your chair. If your legs are crossed, I want you to uncross your legs. And you're going to focus your mind in the area of your heart. Imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or your chest area. I want you to breathe a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Find an easy rhythm that's comfortable. As you continue heart-focused breathing, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. Try to re-experience the feeling that you have for someone you love, a pet, a special place, or focus on a feeling of calm and ease. My biggest takeaway from this is that, of course, it's love that really is at the heart of change. And so the fact that if we breathe, we will be in a more coherent heart rhythm pattern. But if we feel, if we think about someone we love, or for me, I always, my sweet dog comes to mind because he's always ready to receive affection and give affection. Um, or that place that we love, right? When we think of those things, it keeps us in a coherent state for longer periods of time. So breathing can get us there, but these renewing emotions, these experiences that we've had, and spending time on love really does give us more of what we need. And it makes so much sense to me that it comes, it's always within relationship that we change. I think last time I did this, I talked a little bit about the neurobiology of love. And I think what's so interesting about development, growth and development, is that we grow and develop in relationships of love. Babies grow and develop in relationships of love, and we need love our whole life. And it really is, it's a shock absorber or shock absorber. It gives us more of what we need. It gives us more cushion. Sometimes when I feel more depleted, I do, I have a sense of like, there's more love out there. And just seeing the more, right? Spending time with that more. There's more of what we need. It's written in our neurobiology. Burnout. Okay, so let's talk about burnout. What is burnout? Burnout is just constant energy expenditures without the balance of adequate rest and recovery. When we are just stepping on the gas all the time, it's going to lead us to feeling burned out, to having more errors, to having more health challenges, and our performance goes down. The goal is rest and recovery. What helps you to rest and to recover? I cannot get through this talk without talking about um, our cell phones because they really are such an interesting thing. I think of them as an alerting nervous system device. They keep us in our alert nervous system. They use gas. So they took a group of Android users and they looked at more than 100,000 participants and they built a tool to track every user's interaction across 5 days, 24 hours a day. And by every interaction, that means every swipe, tap, type, click. They called them touches. And their average user touched their phone 2,617 times per day. The typical cell phone user does this, right? 2,617 times per day. Half of all phone pickups happen within 3 minutes of a previous one. A heavy phone user touches his or her cell phone 5,427 times every day. My daughter talks about she's watched a few people who have given up their cell phones or done this for periods of time, and just how after a few days they feel free. They just initially they want to check, right? They don't have their phone and they just want to keep checking because we're so inherently used to that, and it keeps us in that fight or flight response. So this use reduces the quality of our conversations. It adversely impacts short-term memory and problem solving. It negatively affects our sleep patterns. It results in more negativity, distress, and less emotional recovery in young children. We know there's increasing obesity, and the positive correlation between smartphone addiction and depression is alarming. Research shows that the mere presence of a smartphone decreases our cognitive performance. A smartphone face down on the table can disrupt social interactions, according to one study, because we compare our current experience with the person in front of us to what might be on the phone, which is called counterfactual thinking. And so, again, you want to pick up that phone versus being present with the person in front of you. And so, it's that phone is kind of intruding into your ability to really stay connected. So, vision is the dominant way that we use energy or we restore our energy. 80 to 90% of processing is visual. The visual system, it is just, it's amazing. You can see on the slide, 40% of our brain volume is used for visual processing in some way. And when you look at how big our eyes are, they're tiny compared to our whole body. But yet 40% of brain volume is used for processing with our eyes in some way. The visual system, because it's the dominant way that you spend your attention or you recover your attention, it's something to think about with our phone. When we look at it while we're waiting in line, it might seem relaxing, but you're actually adding more stress to your day. You just don't realize it. It doesn't seem expensive, but it's costly over time. An alternative to this is gazing at nature's fractals. It's a simple way to make deposits into your mental bank account. You can see here on the right side, it's showing some different fractals in nature. Nature is just the mathematical equation in which things grow or the way that nature presents itself. And our brain inherently recognizes these patterns and it calms us down. It puts more gas in the tank. And I want to lift up silence. I think silence is just such an important thing. You don't restore a chaotic brain with more chaos. We need silence. Silence actually helps to restore us. when we take time to prepare in silence, this can enhance our listening skills, our communication effectiveness. Example that is given here is your meeting's at 10 a.m. and you're going to show up 5 minutes early and just have that time for preparation. Why don't we take time to do this? Why don't we take time to have quiet in our day? For some of us, it's that we're avoiding our thoughts. It can be hard to slow down and just see, oh, our minds are really running. Um, this author, so you can see on the bottom here, Joe McCormick, he wrote a book called Quiet Works, Making Silence the Secret Ingredient of the Workday. And he talks about quiet not as a technique, but an appointment, that it's this time you set aside. And when he started to write this book, he said he really felt like a fraud because he had a really hard time quieting his mind. And he came across a quote that said, anything that's worth doing in life is worth doing poorly. So he just started out with a few minutes at a time, and he changed his way of thinking about it and really allowed himself to do poorly at it, but just do it. And he saw how over time he was able to increase that amount of time that he spent in silence. And it really made a huge difference in how he showed up in meetings, how he showed up in his life. I think he had been doing some coaching with somebody at the time, and he got so much more out of it than when he showed up depleted, kind of running from the last thing. Um, I have There are three ways that solitude can have a positive effect on health and relatedness. Um, so it can facilitate the activation of default mode network, underlying mind wandering, including daydreaming about other people. It can activate brain areas supporting interoceptive awareness. So really more aware of like how we're functioning internally. It can deactivate the prefrontal cortex or deactivate and decrease connectivity, um, giving rise to susceptibility to its spiritual experiences. The capacity to handle and enjoy solitude is a developmental process that may be difficult for many people. Um, but it's actually something that we can continue to develop and increase capacity over time. And it can really help us to function better. So again, anything that's worth doing in life is worth doing poorly. Therapeutic journaling. So I'm going to briefly, I love this. I think therapeutic journaling is absolutely an amazing technique. Therapeutic journaling is prescriptive, and so it's short term. You just journal 3 to 5 times over the course of 4 days for 15 to 20 minutes. It was developed by a Dr. James Pennebaker at the University of Texas in Austin. And if you go to the Veterans Administration Whole Health website and you type in therapeutic journaling, or even just type in VA therapeutic journaling, you will come up with a handout on how to do this technique. And what's so incredible about this is that what James Pennebaker found was that when he did this with his students, he's a psychology professor, his students needed less pain medication and less counseling. And since that time, there's over 200 peer-reviewed articles on this method, and it's been used with so many different populations, and it's really been shown to help people get healthier. And I really think of it as it kind of has you look at, where did I start? Where am I at now? And where am I headed? And when we can't figure out how to move from where we are to where we're headed, we stay in the stress response. And so as soon as we start to kind of look at, okay, I'm going to just say this, like, I'm headed somewhere good. First of all, I am headed somewhere good. I don't think we always are aware of that, right? We can get stuck in the negativity of what's happening. But um, how do we see that these circumstances we're facing can be something for our growth? And the more that we start to identify even a couple of steps towards where we are to where we're headed, it decreases that stress response. We move from processing things in the stress center of the brain, in the amygdala, to processing things in the frontal lobes. We are more creative. We are more resilient. Um, Anyways, it's a beautiful technique, worth a mention. And then hope. I love Arthur Brooks' definition of hope. He wrote a book with Oprah called Build the Life That You Want. And he talks about hope as a verb, that it is um, a positive change through action. That when we hope, we're able to engage, and engagement helps us to grow new neural connections. Disengagement does the opposite. Pessimism leads to disengagement. So we avoid, we're hopeless, we stay in isolation. Optimism can seem like it's the answer, but it can actually lead to unrealistic hopes. So what do we do instead? We hope. It's an action, a verb. It's again positive change through action. And this leads to better physical and mental health. So, resiliency. How do we approach life's challenges? How do we harness our inner strength to rebound from setbacks or challenges? There are levers you can pull in front of stress. Again, it's a generic process. And we're not alone in this. We change within relationship. And my last thought is what we focus on is what grows. And so again, like there we have an immense power internally to focus on things that are renewing or depleting. And it really does matter for our gas tank and what we're able to take on. Um, when you focus on the best in the people around you, you bring out the best in them. And it's the same when we focus on the good that's happening, even inside of us. We get more of that. We see more of that. All right. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, observations, thoughts.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Well, I'm not seeing any or hearing any. So
Okay.
I think with that, we'll adjourn for today. But thank you again for taking time out, Nikki, and presenting to us. It's always a good refresher on this stuff. For those that are still on, there'll be a survey coming out. Please take a few minutes to complete that and provide any topics for our next go around of trainings. Our last training is next Tuesday, and that it will be on evictions. So again, take a couple minutes to do that survey and provide any feedback or topics you would like presented for the fall, winter. There's a lot of thank you so much, amazing information, great information in the chat. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you guys.
And if
Thanks
anyone
for
has any questions come up, please let me know and I can reach out to Nikki too. So,
Okay. All right.
all right. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
You guys too.